Welcome back to Texas Tea. This is your host, Roger D., where we bring on Texans who have had an amazing story of success or have overcome really large obstacles to get to where they are at and hopefully give to others. And that's just what I have on today. Today's guest is quite an amazing story. I think we can all agree that Houston is one of the biggest hubs of sex trafficking, and we need to get those numbers down significantly. And any victim of sex trafficking, their journey does not end once they get out of that situation. And my guest today, she has walked that life and realized how difficult it is to get on your feet when you come from such a traumatic experience. Now, she has taken those experiences, created a nonprofit, and she's helping victims of sex trafficking like herself rebuild an entire new life. So today I have on Kathy McGibbons and Gabrielle Rojas representing 1211 Partners, and I'm very happy to have you guys on.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I have a first question I want to ask. Specifically, if someone happens to be listening or knows someone that has had this terrible event happen to them or continuous event, to try to get on your feet is a big task, and I'm sure someone who's come from a sex trafficking situation doesn't really know where to start or how to rebuild their life. What would be your biggest one point, and we can expand on it, advice to give them?
Well, for someone that is walking in those shoes or has walked in those shoes, I would definitely encourage them to keep fighting and to let them know that they're not alone, that there's a whole community of support out here that are, we're willing and ready to walk alongside them as they journey to better. And we'll say that because a lot of victims don't identify as victims. So the first thing I would say is that, if someone's in a situation where they are being sold for sex or sold for labor, no human deserves that. And so whether you identify as a trafficking victim or not, there is exploitation. And so we definitely want to support them and encourage them and let them know that there's a whole community out here that has their back, safe community.
Yeah. So almost like the first step is being able to identify what you've gone through and that being okay.
Exactly.
It's okay that you went through that and that's not your fault, essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, can we roll into your story to start off then?
Yeah.
How did that happen for you? And you can go in whatever depth you want, but
Sure.
What was the moment you realized that you're like, I really have to get out of this situation, and how did that look, and how did you get into that, and how did you get out? Love to hear that story.
Yeah, glad you asked. So my story, when I tell it, it kind of breaks down a lot of misconceptions that people have about trafficking. So the first image that comes to mind when you hear trafficking, right, is probably something like Taken, big white van, big men taking you away and abducting you. And though that does happen, it rarely does. And so my situation kind of mimics what trafficking really looks like. And it looks like a relationship. For me, it looked like a relationship. It was an individual that I was introduced to by a mutual friend. Really cool guy at first. He was a local celebrity. He was into music, did the singing thing, had his own band and everything. And then he started inviting me and my friends out to hang out and go into the VIP rooms and the green rooms, and we were behind stage with them when they would perform, him and his group would perform. And so it was kind of like a glamorous lifestyle. And that was my level of intoxication, is that glamorous lifestyle. So it wasn't like, drugs and alcohol for me. It was like, oh, snap, we get to go out and we get to go into these clubs, and we're not even old enough to get into some of these clubs. And so it was like, I'm digging this. Like, this is awesome. And so we did that, and we did a lot of hanging out for like the first 6 months after meeting these guys. And then the invitation started to change. So it was no longer, hey, you guys, you girls, come hang out, right? Now it was just like, hey, no, you, Kathy, come hang out with me. And the individual that was sending the invitations happened to be like the head of the group. He was the best singer, played the most instruments, the most talented, and he kind of like had his whole entourage behind him. And so for me, it was like, oh my goodness, like the main guy is interested in me and he wants me to start hanging out with him. And so, yeah, I started hanging out with him, and I thought that I was in this relationship. Obviously, we know that it was a facade, but it was this just relationship of me hanging out and going out to his studio sessions and building. And I say that it was a facade of a relationship because it really felt like a relationship, because he would, ask me questions that made me feel like he cared. So things like, well, what's your favorite color? And what do you like to eat? But, unbeknownst to me, he was also finding out every detail of my life. Like where my friends lived and where my mom lived and where I went to school and where I went to church and just everything, right? So he was finding out every detail of my life. But I thought because he was so into me and he was asking all these questions, it was love. So I fell in love with this guy and had this relationship for almost a year. And right about that year mark is when he started to, tell me his plan about starting his record label. And, so I'm his girl, right? So I need you a part of my team. That's what he was saying. I need you to be with me, and it's going to be us against the world, and we're going to make so much money, and you won't have to like live with your mom anymore and stuff like that. So my first thought was like, well, I don't know anything about music. Why is he asking me? This has to be love if he's asking me to be a part of his team, right? So went for it. And his idea was we had to go to Dallas, leave Houston, and go to Dallas to like meet some investors of this label. And I was hesitant, but I did it. And then literally, like, Mr. Charming is what I identify him as. Mr. Charming literally turned into a complete monster as soon as we got to Dallas. As soon as he got me to Dallas, he flipped the script. And it was like an outer body experience, and I was forced to do like all these crazy things, right? And so I was literally forced into trafficking. What I didn't know as trafficking then, just I was aware of what prostitution was. So I was like, oh my gosh, like the dude that I love is forcing me to sell myself. And he was very violent and very controlling. And a lot of people would ask, why didn't you leave and stuff? But there was a trauma bond already formed. And he was very aggressive, and I was out of fear, obviously. Fast forward, I get out of that terrible, terrible, terrible life. Those 3 months turned into almost a year of my life, of just living outside of my body. And, if you've ever learned or heard what trafficking victims have to go through, I'll leave it to the imagination. Whatever you can imagine is probably what I went through, and 10 times worse. So that happened for almost a year. And so I get out because one of the other girls that he had trafficked started flipping out, really. She was having like a mental breakdown because she had a history of mental illness. And so he couldn't handle her. She was lashing out at him, screaming, all this kind of stuff. And he wanted to have her, put into the hospital there in Dallas. But I convinced him to drive back to Houston to get her to where her doctors were. And he went for that only because she happened to be the mother of his child. And so he couldn't just like be violent and then just offer like he did, like he frequently did other girls, right? This time he was like, okay, well, I have to get her somewhere, because what happens if I go back without her? Then family who and remind you, he's living 2 lives. So his family, all legit, were thinking that, oh, he's making money through his music, but this is, he was living the double life. So we got back to Houston, and I was able, long movie, I'm not gonna like tell the whole script, but it was a crazy, crazy experience on how I even got away from him, but I finally did. And this is where like my purpose comes into play, because I would like to say that I walked away and I never looked back, but I did often, because before I went with this individual, before I allowed this individual into my life, I considered myself a pretty healthy girl. I had a vision of what I wanted to do in life. I had a great support system, came from a good home, good upbringing. But when I got back, I couldn't identify with who that person was before. So all of my dignity and everything was stripped away. So I had to learn life again and learn to be accepted again. And I couldn't comprehend why I just couldn't fit in, and I just couldn't. And so, yeah, there are several times that I looked back like, well, maybe I just need to, because everything that he told me was true about myself. Maybe I just need to go back because that's all I know. But thankfully I didn't, thank God I didn't, because I think he underestimated, though he had me in the palm of his hand, he underestimated the power of my support system. He underestimated the power of my family and my friends. They were not going to let me go back with him. And so, yeah, it took some growing through that, but that's kind of like how I got out.
And I was gonna ask, what do you feel like was the moment that you realized, like, because you said the trauma bond had already been created,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just, I would assume it's insane to try to get away from something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have not experienced that directly, but how are you able to, through that, regardless of that trauma bond, be able to see what was going on, and like what was like the main thing that clicked and you're like, okay, I have to find a way to get out of this?
So when I was actually in the situation, like in Dallas and actively being trafficked, because of the trauma bond, he would still, like, he would do things like abuse me and then come and tell me, oh, that was just for show, much like a DV relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking that I'm still like, oh, well, maybe we just need to get through this rough patch and then we could be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he'll stop making me do these horrible things. But he promised me that he would never put me out on the street when we first got there. He was like, well, I'm just going to have you close to me, my love. I'm going to have you close to me, and we'll just have strangers and strange men and come and take advantage of you. But at least it's here with me in the room, in the hotel room. But that changed, and he put me, I remember like it was yesterday. He put me out on the street. He dropped me off like at 10 o'clock at night, and then I stayed out there till like 6 o'clock in the morning, just walking. And again, you could leave it to your imagination, but when he dropped me off in the street and it was dark and I was alone and it was like I heard wolves, like I was just stranded and alone. That's when it clicked for me. Like, I'm going to die. Like, I'm really going to die out here if I've got to try to find a way out. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I can't say that I was really hopeful, but that little ounce of hope, I was just like, maybe if I just survive moment by moment until we can get out of this. But it was that moment that I knew, oh, snap, I think I'm like in real danger, But
so until that
yeah.
point, he kind of kept a facade of safety,
Yeah.
regardless of what everything was going on.
Yeah.
Wow. So it seems that for anyone that you've probably working with, then it's like realities are meshed of what's really going on and what's really happening to you. And so I think what you said earlier at the beginning of this, being able to identify that is one of the toughest parts.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you reach individuals that are not there yet? Like what are you guys trying to do to get out the message and get out in front of someone who's still in the situation where they're like, okay, I'm safe. Yeah, this is effed up, but like, he's here for me or she's here for me or what have you, and this is still okay. How do you get out in front of someone like that and then also be able to carry that message so they click?
Yeah, I think the most important thing and the most important way that we do that is through the fact that we are a survivor-led organization. And what that means is I can understand, like, I'm not just some square that's coming in and, like, hey, we should help you and save you. No, I'm like on your level. Like, I understand what you're going through. So that approach allows us, because we are a survivor-led organization, it allows us to connect on a different level with individuals that are in those situations because we can speak the language. You can tell me that you're in love, but that bruise says otherwise. So what is your definition of it? And so, yeah, that kind of helps us.
And you can take from your story and just be like, hey, I get what you're saying here, but I was here that was happening to me in this way. I see what you're saying, and that was exactly what was going on here for me, and this is how I fixed it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I definitely don't think people like being told what to do when it's coming from someone who has no idea what they're going through.
Yeah.
So, no, that's amazing. So just the sheer fact that you have such a strong story is one of the biggest beacons to help people out.
Yeah.
And from actually like trying to find those individuals before they're seeking help, because is it just that you have to, you're only able to help those seeking help, or you try to get in front of those who don't know they need help yet?
Yeah, so in Houston, we have a really great anti-trafficking organization. The beauty of it is that no one organization has to take on the entire responsibility, right? So we don't really focus on outreach as 1211 partners. That's not our main focus, but we do partner with several organizations that do. And so we actually go out to the brothels, to the streets, to the massage parlors, the illicit massage parlors, and we're like in their face, and we're just showing strip clubs, and we're just showing them love, right? We're here to talk. Like, we're here to let you know that you are human and you exist to us.
That's right, because you guys are kind of more on the back end when finally, yes, because you're a victim of sex trafficking, but you carry that victimhood into the rest of your life until you can find someone to help you overcome. I know you guys are doing the most that you guys can do to get in front of as many people. The buzzword that's going around a lot in the last couple of years is ally. And like, I think people like say that too lightly. If you were to give someone who feels like, hey, like maybe seeing a situation or just at least wants to be aware of what to look for and what they can do, what would be something that they can continually try to figure out or continually try to do to like help those who are in that situation, and be an ally, as I would say?
Yeah. I think when we look at trafficking, it can be daunting because it's so big. And so a lot of people, they do one or two things. Either they're like, oh yeah, that's too big, I'll send money and leave, right? Or they just, they jump all in without really knowing their lane, and then they get burnt out really quickly.
Which by the way, money's still good. Donate.
Money is still good. Money, yes, that's the number one thing. Give. Yeah. But definitely the practical resources. So just recapping on what I told you about my story, when I came out of the life, I didn't understand how to be normal again. So my healing process really looked like me faking it, mocking people, and kind of imitating people that were around me. So at school and at church and in the community, I'm like, okay, well, maybe they do that and they walk a certain way, or they dress this way, so maybe I need to start dressing like this. All of those things were imperative to my healing journey and are imperative to a lot of survivors' healing journey. So how can you help? You can help by bringing your gift to the table. So if you are good in finances, we need people to come help individuals learn how to create a financial budget, or how to budget their finances, how to pay rent, how to write checks, how to have manage their finances. If you're good at cooking, some people need to learn how to cook for their families because a lot of people have babies. They need to learn how to be that. Whatever you can bring to the table, I always encourage people to take a step back. Like, I know you want to jump in, but take a step back and figure out what is it you're good at. If you're good at giving, hey, nonprofits need your help. We need you. If you're good at whatever you're good at, take that passion that you already have and then bring it to the anti-trafficking movement. And it's just that simple.
Yeah, so it's really look at the fact that someone getting out of this needs all the life skills. And figure out what your life skill is that you're really good at, and volunteering that time would be the most beneficial.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you. Okay, you summarized that very well. So that's a lot to learn. And you said something very interesting where you say you were mimicking those around you. So that, I think, is maybe a really important point. I'd like you to expand on it more. Is it a big pathway of finding oneself again?
Oh yeah, it's huge because like I said, your dignity is completely stripped away. Your moral compass is completely broken down. And so you just really have to figure out, when people say, the normal life or have a normal life, well, what does normal mean? Because my normal life for almost 2 years was under the control of this aggressive trafficker, right? So is that normal? Like, what does that mean? So the first thing on that pathway is to identify, number one, as someone that has been exploited, as someone that has survived this crime. And then just coming to terms that with your reality, like, yes, this happened to me. I'm not to blame. We have to work past the blame, the guilt, and then all this stuff, right? So it took me years to actually understand what happened to me. And I didn't even know what trafficking was, but I just started volunteering with some random organizations in Houston. Yeah. And upon volunteering, I realized, oh, we're helping women. That's great. Yeah. Or we're helping, this happens to boys too, right? So we're helping kids. That's great, right? I love giving back. I knew that I connected with that part. Like, I always loved giving back.
So at this point, you had not even been able to see that you were trafficked.
Right.
Which is crazy.
I know. Yeah. I just thought that I had a bad boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, never date anyone like him again, but I didn't know that this was a whole crime, And so, yeah, volunteering. And then I realized, oh, wait, they've been what? And so just hearing other survivors' stories and then sharing my story one-on-one with individuals who have walked that life, it's like, oh, wait, this is not just me. Yeah. This is a whole thing. And I started to learn quickly what trafficking was. I understood the term.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like a aha moment.
Yeah. And when you're talking about being okay with that, the fact that it happened to you and not to blame yourself, would it be beneficial for family and friends to, this is sounds like a simple question, but how, I'll rephrase it. How can friends and family be more patient in understanding that their family member or friend has come out of this and it's not their fault, that they're not exactly A+ at life skill right now?
Yeah, listening is the first skill that family and friends need, loved ones need, because you have to really hear survivors when they're telling their story. And that means they may not even use words, but you still have to hear them. You have to understand the education piece is huge too. So if there are resources that can educate you on what trafficking is versus going to the individual that experienced it and say, okay, well, what happened and how many times and yeah, all these questions that are really, really triggering. Instead of doing that, just let that individual talk at their own pace when they're ready. But on the other side of it, you can be doing the research and you can be engaging on the trauma, be more trauma informed, and how do I really navigate these conversations and stuff. And so with the education piece and listening to your loved one that has experienced this, you will be like the bomb loved one. You'll be like the bomb family and the bomb friend. Yeah. We would, and I say we, because a lot of times I speak on behalf of survivors, but we would so love that without the judgment.
So educate yourself more individually, and then also allow the person to open up without your own selfish wants of figuring out what it happens. Let them tell their story.
Right.
Over time. Okay. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Because it kind of makes me think about, as sad as this is, when someone's like, oh my God, did you hear so-and-so passed away or died? And they're like, what happened?
Yeah.
I always that sounds like, why is that your first question?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's probably something terrible that happened.
Right.
But I think it's kind of like a knee-jerk response for most people to want to hear about distress and bad things that happen, probably because of how our media is structured and it's
absolutely.
Always negative.
Yeah.
But that's thank you for expanding on that.
Sure.
So you have someone that's gotten out of this situation, doesn't exactly know where to turn, but they meet Kathy, and what are the first things you guys are going through with them to make sure that they're at least starting out on the right leg before you really go into the deep of it? But what are you guys doing with them in the early stages?
So building a relationship, just so that we can have a trust-based relationship. And we do that through mentorship too, if they choose to partner with us. And we always, in our organization, we use the term partner because we're not little g gods. We can't run around saying that we're going to save you, and we didn't rescue anyone.
Yeah.
It was the survivor's brave choice and courageous decision to say, okay, I think I need help. That was on them. So we didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And so we want to partner with them. We try to create a partnership with them to say, okay, hey, let's figure out what you need. We will follow you. As much as you want us to be involved, we will follow you. Does that mean that you need safe housing? Great. Of course, that's one of the number one things is the feeling of safety. Then we will connect you to resources that can get you housing. If you want someone to walk alongside you because you want that support, maybe you don't have a healthy support circle, you feel like you're all alone, maybe you don't have family, then that's where our mentorship programs come in, where we can literally form this mentorship circle around you and help you navigate through life stuff. And that can be anything, right? So we try to look at like the immediate goals versus this big elaborate plan. What are you going to be when you grow up plan, right? That's not realistic. And so number one, obviously, to answer your question, is a trust-based relationship.
Yeah, I'm starting to hear a trend where it's a soft approach, and taking the selfishness out, and taking the as someone who's supporting the ego out, and being like, look, the most important action was the fact that you came to us, and we're here just to help that, and keeping things simple from the beginning. So for you, obviously, Kathy, you had said that you kind of realized what you had gone through helping out and volunteering. You knew that volunteering made you feel good.
Yeah.
And you were seeing similarities. You wanted to do that. You're already trying to figure out things on how to just live a normal life by yourself. At what point were you like, you know what? I want this to be my purpose. And where did that start? And where did that click over?
When I started seeing the impact that it had on individuals that I would share my story with. So storytelling is really my thing, is what kind of got me through.
Yeah, you're pretty good at it.
When I got out, I wrote a journal because I didn't have anybody to talk to. And it's not that, remember I said I had a supportive family. It's not that they weren't there to support, it's just that they didn't understand. So I couldn't have a conversation with them. So it went on paper, and that paper turned into a book, right? And it was just supposed to be this, okay, great, I got a book. This is just to help people one-on-one. And so I would share it one-on-one, and people would come back to me, and particularly women, and with their bawling their eyes out, like, this happened to me. And then when I started to share bits and pieces of my story publicly, I would always get hit up like, you have no idea, but I went through that. And these are people that are not public. These are people that you wouldn't even think of, right? Some people that were even in my circle that I didn't know. But yeah, so this happened to me as a child, or this happened to me when I was in college, or whatever the case may be. When I realized the power of sharing my story, that's when I knew it was my purpose. I was like, oh, okay, so I didn't go through all that crap for nothing. Like, this pain is turned into purpose, and I actually can help people. That's dope. Like, I'm going to do it then. And so that's when it turned for me.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think one of the biggest things that you said there was that people are able to relate. And that's another trend I'm starting to notice. But I feel like that goes a lot with everything from addiction to mental health to sex trafficking as well, where people, it doesn't really penetrate the skull until you can relate to the situation. I notice a lot of the billboards that say, if you think you're being trafficked, call this number. How inefficient do you feel like those are?
So if you
Sorry, that was a leading question.
No, if you recall.
How do you feel about them?
If you recall, it's funny because I just had a billboard conversation today. That's why it threw me off. I was like, were you listening? But
I am Google.
But I think that, if you recall, I said that I didn't know that I was in it. So if I probably saw billboards and didn't resonate with me because I didn't know what the heck that was. Like, what do you mean trafficking? That's some foreign thing that doesn't happen. That's a border problem, right? I don't understand what that is. And so it doesn't resonate with individuals that are actually in the life.
For what it's worth, even myself, whenever I see those signs, initially my subconscious is telling me about sex trafficking over the border. That's what I'm thinking. That's reaching out to.
Right. Yeah.
So you would say then that not a huge fan of them? I'm not trying to put it down.
No. I'm not a huge fan of some of the messaging. I think if we can change some of the messaging and make it more real. Make it like speak my language and speak individuals' language that are actually in the game, in the life.
Yeah.
I keep saying in the game, in the life, that are being trafficked. That's what you call it. But that are being trafficked, then they would be effective. Because I could see that and say, well, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to be sold for money. Then that makes more sense to me. Or I'm not, whatever. I'm valuable. I'm worth, whatever the case may be, whatever they need to say. But I think if we change some of the marketing and the designs, then yes, absolutely. Because that number goes a long way.
Yeah. I would assume there's ample help as soon as you pick up the phone. I was gonna go back because you mentioned the term in the game, and talking about messaging. I would assume that when you're being trafficked, there's that positive spin on things, and it's almost like a war that's being battled unfairly because there's a constant. This is just my rambling and thoughts. Is there a constant distortion of reality, and then you have messages trying to get you out of there that are completely detached?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you said that perfectly.
Because I'm trying to roll this into, because right now where we are with social media and everything like that, I think that's more likely to get in front of someone's attention. Have you guys thought about, I know you said you're ramping up the social media, but have you guys thought about eventually putting dollars into marketing campaigns and trying to target those who more than likely be being trafficked?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we want to do. It's being done. Some organizations on a national level, they're definitely on the targeting social media, because I say that social media right now these days, that's like the trafficker's hunting ground, right? So all you literally have to do is scroll, hit a DM, and boom, like it's a disaster. So definitely, that's definitely something that we as an organization would think about in the near future.
I got you. So that's so step one, get the social media up and running.
Yeah.
And I keep going to the front end of everything because I'm sorry. I know you had already told me that though you guys are helping as much as possible, it's more about the after. That so getting back to that, how would you guys get in front of, or how are you guys getting in front of more people and individuals that have gotten through this situation? We're a Kathy that didn't even understand the situation, did get out of it, but like, how do you get in front of someone like that?
So it's a lot of our relationships come from partnering organizations. We have a lot of partners in Houston in the anti-trafficking movement. And so a lot of times they have residential care and they're focused more. We have this map, right? But right in the middle is like programs and residential treatment centers and assessment centers where they actually are living, where survivors can actually live and be in a program for like 18 months or whatever the case may be. Then after they graduate, then it's like, okay, now you need to figure out how to really do life on your own, because you're not going to have the cushion of a program anymore. We've taught you how to do resumes and stuff like that, but it's kind of like when you graduate from high school or college, it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this little piece of paper? What, you have to learn how to do that. And so that's where we come in.
Got you.
Yeah.
I like that. What do I do with this? What do I have this now? Got you. So you're leveraging the partnership you essentially have. Yeah, you had to build those partnerships. When you first started, how did you approach these outreach programs? How do you approach these government agencies, and how does one go about, like, let's say someone's listening right now that wants to do a lot of good in the world, and maybe it's sex trafficking, maybe it's something similar or different, or but it's going to be involving with a lot of government agencies. What were the hurdles that you had to overcome talking to these officials, getting their attention, getting them to take you seriously, and so on and so forth?
Well, I had to definitely, like you said, build those relationships and partnerships with the people that are already doing it. So our approach, we didn't want to come duplicate a service that was already there. We wanted to fill in a gap. And so by showing people and our partnering organizations like, hey, we're not trying to step on any toes. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel or duplicate services that are working effectively, because that doesn't make any sense. We're literally here for the people that are being affected, which are victims and survivors of trafficking. And this is where we've identified some gaps. And so we're going to take this chunk of the gap and we're going to stay in our lane. and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it well.
Yeah. So you identified that there's clearly a lot of well-working parts already there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, the clear need is holding their hand and making sure that they find the life that they really want. And
Right.
you're like, that there's a big void there. I'm going to fill that void.
Yeah.
Fill it full of love, right?
Yeah.
And get it done. So okay, that's so for anyone that's listening, then it's the same as any business,
Mm-hmm.
just the same. Not that this is nonprofit, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but it's easier to find a need that needs to be fulfilled than
Right.
try to be repetitive.
Right.
Okay, cool. Of course, running a nonprofit is like a business,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that everything that has to do with financial and all that, and working with employees and working with clients as well,
Mm-hmm.
can be stressful at times. I would assume you have a pretty strong purpose, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you're human, just
Yeah.
like me. So when times get tough, what's the easiest way? What would advice you would give for someone that's working in a very like high stress, high trauma situation to keep yourself going, to keep your head up, and to be the strongest
Yeah.
lady in the room for those who really need that?
Yeah, definitely self-care. And I know that that term is overused a lot, and it
It's
doesn't.
all right. I used the word ally, so
Yeah.
we could use buzzwords.
But definitely self-care. And that doesn't always look like breathing exercises. That means like, hey, unplugging and going and chilling with your family and
Mm-hmm.
reconnecting with who you really are. And then not being the end all be all, which
Mm-hmm.
means rely on a team of people. I'm huge on collaboration, so big on it. If I get a call from, let's say, a young woman that needs immediate housing and maybe she needs some detox and rehab, I'm not going to say, okay, I will do that for you, right? Like, that's not my lane, but I can refer her to some really cool partners that I have. So not taking on too much, kind of staying in your lane. Stay in your lane and self-care. And rely on a team. Build a team of people that can support you when you do need to take a step back, or that can hold you accountable when they realize that you need to take a step back.
Yeah, got you. So as much as apparently we hate that word self-care,
Yeah.
right? Term of self-care. No, that's really important. I struggle myself of sometimes not doing that enough, but something really cool that you continue to say is stay in your lane. And I think I've noticed at least a lot of individuals who are looking to do good in the world. They do want to try to solve everything, whatever that niche is. It's still every part of it, but that's really important. I think that you are realizing that you have a gift for a very specific part that you've learned, and you can hone in on that. And then you're like, other people have gifts just as good as me in the other areas.
Exactly.
So that's super cool.
I'm reading this really cool book called Learning to Be by Juanita Rasmus. And in the book, she talks about you deserve your want. Like, you're deserving of your want. So things that you want, because a lot of times we get into this and it's like, oh my gosh, my whole life is, anti-trafficking, and I just got to focus on this. And so really you can't even have normal conversations with your friends without talking about trafficking. And a lot of us that are in this movement are like that. It's like, oh yeah, they're talking about football, and by the way, we went on outreach, and it's like, okay, like really, but you really have to connect with yourself. And what do you want outside of this mission, outside of this purpose? What are some of the things that you want? You want to travel, you want to be great, you want to do whatever, right? You deserve your want. It doesn't mean just because you have a purpose and you have a calling and this is your mission doesn't mean that has to overtake your entire life. You still have to have some balance. Yeah.
No, that's a clear problem that I think a lot of people who are high achievers struggle with for sure. So that's funny. Yeah. I'm sure as much as you want to help everyone all the time in this, it does, you do need to recharge your battery.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
As far as like the support system, something that I wanted to add on to family or friends that know somebody that's going through this is, yes, go at the pace of the person that's gone through this, but also let them know that you're there. Just kind of like, just kind of push it on the table. Like, I'm here if you need me, no pressure. The ball's in your court, basically, kind of thing. Because I think that was something that I kind of struggled with. I had an amazing support system. My mom she's like a hero. She's a fighter. She really is. But she kind of pushed me sometimes when I needed people to back off. And then there was people where I'm like, I really need help, or I really need to talk, but I don't know who I can go to because I don't know if they will be willing to listen with open ears and no judgment. So I think just kind of making sure that the person you're wanting to help knows that you are there, because there are some times where it's because you're kind of having to relearn things. So you don't know if you can really trust that person. Like, yeah, I grew up with my cousin and I know they would never really judge me, but I just had my whole life flipped upside down. So I don't know if that trust is still there.
Yeah. So it's so we're doubling down on the fact that anyone that has a family member or a friend that has come out of this situation, you have to be super patient. You have to. It has to be almost like a push-pull in the softest of ways.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here when you need me, but also you don't have to talk to me.
It's kind of confusing, and I feel bad having gone through it and put my family going through that with me. But it really, like you said, a push and pull, because there was times where like I didn't want to get out of bed. I really didn't, and my mom she would force me, like, you need to get up, you need to be productive today, even if you do just one load of laundry, do it. And that was the push that I didn't know that I needed.
Yeah.
So I think it is a lot of give and take in that relationship.
Okay, I got you. And how did you meet Kathy, by the way?
It's actually a funny story. So
I love funny stories.
Well, I mean, it's funny, but not too funny. It's a dark humor funny.
Okay.
So Kathy actually used to work with my mom at a dialysis clinic. I don't know how many years ago. And the way that I met my trafficker was the same way. It was, I think they call it a Romeo relationship. So we were together, and I eventually got married to this person. And I knew him for about 5 months, and then we got married, and we were married a little bit over a year. Well, throughout that marriage is when the trafficking and the domestic violence started. And it was very similar to Kathy, where it was, oh, I didn't mean to do that, or, I had a really long day and I shouldn't have let my anger take over. So it was a very toxic pulling back and forth relationship. And there was one point, my big realization moment was he had been very physical with me, and I had to cover up the bruises with makeup. And I was staring at myself in the mirror thinking, when did I become this person? I was not raised to be that way. I was always I'm going to do what I want and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. I had a stable household. I had younger siblings. I went to college. So it's like, I knew what I was supposed to do, quote unquote, but I still had this person who had that manipulation over me. So I was always coming back, not that I shouldn't say I was always coming back, but I never left. And it wasn't until I just had a moment and my mom caught me crying, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I showed her the bruises that were left on me, and I told her if she remembered her friend, because my mom had told me Kathy's story, if she remembered her friend who this happened to, but I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know that it was called trafficking. Even then, it didn't take me till months afterward that I realized that's the same exact thing. There's no sugarcoating it. I was being trafficked by my husband at the time. So that was how I met Kathy. I met her because my mom knew her, and I used her in a way to tell my story.
Oh, I got you. Thank you for sharing, by the way.
Thank you.
And I hear both of y'all's stories, and it's the word trafficking. I think maybe even that has to be like re-envisioned, because for both of y'all, that word probably didn't come to mind at all. It was just more exploitation than anything like that. Right. And that maybe be a good step at some point for agencies to try to kind of, I want to say rebrand. That's probably not the best term, but look at it from a different light, because it seems very technical, the term, when you're talking about human experience. Like it's a technicality of a human experience. So even in your situation, you had to kind of have light shown on it, and you had no idea until I'm guessing you talked to Kathy, and then it started to be able to relate.
Yeah, it did take a while. I had to I went to counseling, and as I was going through counseling, I would tell them, this is what happened to me. My ex-spouse did this to me, and it took weeks and weeks of them reiterating, that this wasn't your fault. You had no part you were not to blame in this, and they were trafficking you. And it still took a while to identify with that, because it kind of, I know it sounds weird to say, but it makes you feel dirty more so than the actual act of doing it.
Yeah.
Because there's such a big stigma with this, and thinking about Taken, and you also think about, I know this is an old movie, but Hustle and Flow, like that's not the lifestyle that was. You were literally being forced and threatened with violence, or actually had violent acts committed to you if you didn't comply with this person. And so it's kind of hard to say that I am a trafficking victim, because you really don't want to identify that with that. And it's so hard to come to terms with that, because in part because I think part of, the mental aspect of it, like, no, that didn't happen to me. It's denial. But also because there's such a big stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to kind of say that you were trafficked.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't know that that's what that meant. Like many of us.
I think that's like the one thing I could probably empathize with, because for me as an addict, one of the biggest hurdles was accepting that I was an addict, because there's such a bad stigma that like I'm a bad person,
Right.
you know? And I think that's a societal thing that probably needs to change in general, is that you have to almost accept a victimhood of something that inherently your brain is telling you this is bad.
Right.
It's bad to be associated with this. So does that come up in because I know we talked about accepting the fact that you are a victim of being trafficked. How do you help someone get over that kind of perspective so that they stop looking at it as something bad? They start realizing that it is just a part of their past, and the most important part is that they overcame it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm glad you used that word, overcame, because that's a term that I use all the time. Even when I'm talking to survivors, it's like, no, you are an overcomer. And then it has to be like self-defined. So what do you think? You tell me what you've been through. Was it abuse? Was it whatever it was? Was it overcoming an addiction? Whatever little piece that they can identify with, we kind of just let them run with that. But then slowly introduce the fact that, hey, this other bad thing happened to you. The fact that someone was a third party was actually making profit off of you, and you were forced to do and things that you probably wouldn't do on your own. That's trafficking, right? And so it's like it's like spoon feeding them, literally, because that's what had to happen for both of us, I believe, is just that we had to be spoon fed that. Even now I say that I'm an overcomer of trafficking, and I love the word overcomer because it's, for me, in my personal healing, because restoration is like a lifelong process. So for me in my healing journey, overcomer is bigger than trafficking. So I always say, well, I'm an overcomer of trafficking. Some people identify better with survivor of trafficking. Great. Survivor is bigger than trafficking. I need you to hear that I'm a survivor of trafficking. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's kind of like that. So, and I love what you said about just changing society and how they think, because it's such a shameful thing. Much like Gaby, because I came from a good home and a good upbringing, it's like, well, this is my fault. Like, I should have known better.
Yeah, it's interesting too that you mentioned upbringing. I think the general, and I'm trying to pull from when I think of sex trafficking, there's like innate thoughts that I'm like, that's stupid. But like you're conditioned to think like, okay, well, that's probably lower income, or it's across the border, like we mentioned before. So there's innate things that I think are attached to it from a societal kind of media perspective, that because that's so attached, you're like, well, this can't happen to me because I'm not
Right.
I'm not that. Or like, or once you do accept, you're like, well, am I, you know, from a lower point? Like, do I not deserve a good life? Like, I don't know if that's what goes through the heads. But.
Yeah, and those risk factors are very real. So obviously, people that are impoverished are at high risk. Foster care system, those that have been through the foster care system are highly at risk. Those that people of color are highly at risk, right? And so those are real risk factors. But people need to understand that those are not the only risk factors. And so the way that I explain it is that sex trafficking doesn't target individuals. It does not discriminate. It targets vulnerabilities. So if you've ever had a vulnerable moment in your life, whether that's struggling with a marriage, whether that's struggling with college tuition, whatever your vulnerability is, and we all have them, if a trafficker can sense that vulnerability, which is what happened with me, I was the weakest link out of all of our friends. And I didn't grow up with a father, which wasn't a huge void to me, because every memory of my father was great, and my mom did an excellent job. So I wasn't walking around like, oh yeah, I come from a single parent household. But he sensed that vulnerability, and so he preyed on that vulnerability. So whatever vulnerability that you have, that's what this thing called trafficking targets.
And you said your biggest hook was the glamour. So it is as you had mentioned before, it's going to be different for each person.
Right.
So you have a real predator, and to try to look out for that, like it's like obviously I think the statistic, I don't know the exact statistics, but I would assume it's clearly more females than males that are being tracked. Correct?
Yes.
What should a woman look out for to make sure she doesn't get attached to or preyed on by someone like that?
It comes from your inner self,
Okay.
right? Honestly, just to be quite honest, I know that's really vague and hard, but you really have to. My instinct told me that I probably wasn't in a good situation, but I wanted that love and attachment and that friendship and that partnership with this individual more than I wanted to connect with myself, more than I valued myself. And so that put me at huge risk. But then also just knowing some of the red flags, like if this individual can't meet your family or is hesitant about meeting your family and coming to like Thanksgiving dinner and stuff like that, then that's a red flag. If this individual speaks on your behalf or is totally controlling, like in my case, I did have red flags. I just didn't understand what those were at the time. I felt it like, oh, this makes me feel kind of funny, but maybe he wants to know where I am every minute of the day because he cares, right? That was a red flag that I should have paid attention to. And so sometimes it just takes really paying attention to some of those red flags. And we can, connecting with your organizations and people that are that understand this space can give you some, a long list of those red flags if people are unsure. And if the individual that is going through it can't recognize it, it's very important for the support system, her circle of support, to recognize it.
Right.
Actually, can I go off of that as far as recognizing the red flags? Like you said, when you're in it, you dismiss them a little bit because you're like, oh no, like that's my friend or that's my boyfriend. They would never say that in a malicious way. For viewers that might be going through this system or going through this or who have gone through this, I kind of want to reiterate that it is not their fault that they did not recognize those red flags, because you are so comfortable, and they are master manipulators, because that is what they are, that they have found out a way to get past your security gates, so to speak, and make you kind of like, just whatever, it's no big deal. So something that I heard from one of my therapists was that really helped me, because I put a lot of pressure on myself as, why didn't I notice that? Or why didn't I knew something was up and why did I stay? Was that, how evil would you have to be to recognize that? To recognize that that is a malicious person.
That's true.
So that's I kind of want them to get that, so that they realize that it really isn't their fault. And if they want to get you, there's kind of not really a quick way to get out of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because to realize that kind of evil, you have to be comfortable with that kind of evil. So,
Right.
So like, who's comfortable with that kind of evil? But you're also saying that it seems that when I was listening to y'all, that the main points are control, isolation and they don't integrate into your circle at all.
They don't. It's a process, right? And so this is not the only process, but what we've identified as like kind of like the common process, especially with Romeo pimps and CEO pimps, is their process of.
What's a CEO pimp?
So the CEO pimp will come at you with a job, like,
okay,
hey, I have this really great job opportunity, and it's so professional. So mine happened to be all three. So it's Romeo pimp, CEO, and then Gorilla are kind of like the main ones.
Okay.
Gorilla, very forceful. Gorilla's more like taken, abduction, snatch
Right.
you off the street and like it's going down. But the Romeo relationship, the CEO will be like, hey man, like, or send you an email or send you a DM, like I have this really great opportunity for you, whether it's modeling, whether it's, if it's a young boy, it could be something to do with labor, like this football team or whatever the case may be. Or the job just seems really, really legit, and they can back it up and they can provide evidence that this is happening. But when you get there, you obviously know that it's entrapment, like it's a way to capitalize.
Kind of a random offshoot from that. How often because obviously there is a legitimate and legal sex work. Of course, porn is the biggest industry here. How often are those lines blurred, and and how can that be combated?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that, because there is no lines. There's no lines. It's all together. Where there is porn, there is trafficking. Where there is illicit massage parlors, there is trafficking. Where there are commercial sex businesses, there's trafficking. So it's really, really hard. I can't say, I'm looking for the word, but let me say that, I respect individuals that are saying, I'm doing this by my own choice. I respect them, I listen to them, I hear them. But with trafficking, it is literally, you can be trafficked in any way. You can even start off as like thinking that, okay, this is consensual or whatever. But once a third party comes into it, you've been trafficked. And I have some friends that exited the porn industry, and when you hear their stories about what they've had to go through, it is absolutely awful. And so traffickers don't have just one lane. They're not just like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna capitalize off of you and I'm gonna work you on the street, or I'm gonna work you through hotels or whatever. It's wherever there's sex, there's trafficking, right? Yeah. There's potential for trafficking. So, and these are master manipulators, and you have to think of it like a business. It's a criminal organization, but it's a business. You have the facilitator, which is the trafficker. You have the demand, which unfortunately are the victims and survivors. And then you have you have the demand, which are the buyers. Yeah. And then you have the supply, which are the victims and traffickers. So you think about this as a business. Well, the facilitator is not only going to have one lane. He's constantly thinking about, because he's driven by greed, right? So how can I capitalize? Right. And so when you think of strip clubs, and a lot of individuals are run through strip clubs. Some people are there consensually, yes, but that's like the favorite place for pimps to go sit down and kind of like recruit their next victim. Same thing with porn. It's just, there are no lines. It's all together. Yeah.
And another different offshoot, those who are the facilitators themselves, though they're clearly not good people, they also come from, I would assume, some trauma in their life as well. Like it seems that it's a meetup of trauma meeting trauma. Yeah. Both trauma becoming an extremely aggressive and manipulative person, and someone who can like kind of fit that mold. And that's beyond unfortunate, of course.
And the buyers too. I think it's all.
Yeah. It's just a big mess of brokenness.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
But you overcome and you repair, and you can on all ends, technically.
Yeah, and I think that's possible for all players in the game. Yeah. A lot of times, allies will think that the first thing that a survivor wants is immediate justice. Well, no, we want immediate healing first. And then let's think about the whole justice piece. I absolutely advocate for justice. I think everyone that commits a crime should pay for that crime. However, if I really were to have my way, I would really want that person to pay for his crime and then come out on the other end advocating with us like, hey, no, that was really messed up what I did and how I treated women. and children were awful. It was completely awful. But now I want to educate people and other like traffickers on how to get out of this. That would be like my dream versus you rotting in jail for 100 years, right?
Yeah, because that's not going to, technically, that's not going to change their headspace.
Right.
It's going to make them obviously have consequence for
Right.
what happened. But yeah, that's an interesting look, because most people will, because on the outside looking in, it's like, make this person pay. Especially friends and family. They probably want to murder that individual, honestly.
Yeah.
And it is not unnatural for someone to immediately feel that.
Right.
It's just, it's really good that you're looking at it from a big picture situation, that like the more we can heal, the better.
Exactly.
So if someone wants to, oh, you know what I didn't ask this whole time? Where did 1211 come from? How did I forget that question?
Yeah, right? So 1211 came from a Bible verse.
Okay.
Revelations 12:11. And a part of my healing journey was my spiritual aspect. As prayer like got me through and just connect. And a lot of survivors will connect with something, whether they believe in God or not. It's like they got to connect to something, right? And so for me, it was being raised by my grandmother, who was like literally taught us these Bible verses. And I just remember that, you know, it kind of got me through. And so 12:11, the verse Revelations 12:11 says, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And for me, my overcoming came from my testimony, AKA sharing my story.
Right.
So the more people that I can get to tell their story through 1211 Partners, and tell your story doesn't mean, you know, doing the podcast or whatever the case may be. It can mean however that looks for you. You're still telling your story by living your life. So that's where that came from.
That's good. That's good. So, so essentially overcoming from just speaking your truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel a little bad saying speaking your truth. I hate that term.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
But
Speaking
it's
your
true.
story. Speaking
Yeah.
your story.
It's your truth.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Gabby, for coming on, guys. To look you guys up, it's 1211.org.
Yes,
Or
12 the
1211
word and then 11 the number .org.
You can donate there. As Kathy had said, if you feel like you can bring a very powerful life skill to the table, they could contact mentors. So if you've had the experience, anyone that
and housing.
Yeah, that's a big
housing and jobs. So a lot of times when survivors get out of this life, out of trafficking, they come with a lot of things on their record. So another misconception is that traffickers just sell you for sex, but you're literally their fallback person. If they sell drugs too, then you're the runner. You're everything. You're writing bad checks. You're getting things in your name. So naturally, when people get out of the life, they have things on their record that prevent them from succeeding, right? And so there are these huge barriers that we expect people just to like, okay, just live your life. But how can I when I can't get a job and I can't get housing? And so our huge ask right now is just anyone that feels that they can help with that, try to help overcome some of those barriers. Employers who are willing to give second chance. These ladies are phenomenal. Look at Gabby, like she's like freaking a doctor or something. I don't even know.
She's a doctor. I don't even know.
but like these ladies are phenomenal. Not everyone. People have skills. These individuals have skills. They just happen to have a jacked up past that they had no control over. So to say that, oh wait, this bad check is on your record. Yeah, you can't get independent, safe housing. Like then what's left? The street. Right. And so we really, really need partners that will partner with us for employment partners and housing partners, project manage. I mean, what do you call them? Property managers and people that are willing to say, okay, well, you know, let's figure this thing out.
Got you. So if you guys know anyone that's in property management, or you yourself are in property management specifically for housing, go to 1211.org, 12 spelled out, 11 number. Kathy needs your help to help get these amazing overcomers back on their feet and back into a normal life. You can also find Kathy on Instagram if you want to talk to her directly, at Kathy McGibbons.
Yep.
And then I think you do have a 1211 Twitter account.
It's a baby.
A baby account.
You know, we are definitely building up our social media. If anyone wants to help with that, hey.
So anyone that's a social media whiz, come on board as well. And if you have any questions for Kathy, you could, of course, drop them in the comments below. Of course, this is Texas Tea Podcast. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, of course, YouTube and TikTok. Very soon. I looked at Gonzalo and he gave me the look. I'm definitely slacking on the social media myself as well. But Kathy, Gaby, thank you so much. Thank you for telling your story, and hopefully it can be an inspiration to others. Very grateful for you guys coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys.